Here's a couple quick announcements. Everybody is in tune now with the decks will be emailed to you, and you will fill out some surveys of who you spoke with. Everybody got that, right? Everyone there? Has anybody tried to download that, actually? Has anybody gotten that first email? A few people have. That was odd. All right, well, be sure to let me know if you have any problems. Byron at Writer Access, the complaint center headquarters of the world. Let's see. I want to thank this moment, maybe just all the speakers. There are a few speakers left here. Did everybody enjoy this incredible speaker repertoire? Both days, right? Woo! Incredible. Round of applause. This has been really a fairly epic experience for me to see these incredible speakers perform, so thanks for that. And of course, Brian's going to join us in a few minutes as well, but just after this session, we'll go right to our keynote. But I want to just do a quick survey, if I could, and get a feel from the audience on who is marketing globally at the moment. Probably a fair number of people, okay? Who is having challenges marketing globally? Obviously, why you're in this session. Let me look at one more question that our audience panel wanted to see. And who is in the discovery stage of thinking about marketing globally? No one. Okay, so that means you're either marketing globally or you're not marketing globally or somewhere in the middle. No one's in the middle. Everyone's marketing globally. Everybody wants to hear this panel talk. Okay, well then I'll shut up. Does anybody have any questions? Very unusual, but I think it might be worthy. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to have answered in this panel? I'd love to hear a few of what you have in mind. Anybody want to brazenly just go at it? Raise your hand if so. Awesome, this is going to be so cool. This is breaking new content marketing ground. Questions in advance.
How do you address different words that are used in the English language, like here versus the UK, when you're marketing to both those in the UK and here? So I'm in insurance and we call brokers, we call them producers in the US, and we call them intermediaries in the UK, and there are all sorts of fun nuances in different words that are used here versus there. How do you write content that appeals to both?
Awesome. Any other questions? Ooh, I gave you that opportunity. That's it. Okay. All right. Let's spin around the room and talk. Let's learn a little bit more about Amit. Amit is first of all, he's the CEO of a Dubai-based company called Nexa. In his former pre-digital life, Amit was a partner in a music management company that fired a talentless songwriter who subsequently went on to write songs for who?
Shania Twain.
I just wanted you to say that.
Celine Dion.
Because, and that was a failed.
She was rubbish. She was rubbish.
At the time. Wow. You might have some questions about that, by the way. Next, I want to introduce Laura, who is here. She's a translation expert and our global translation manager at Writer Access. She is an expert from Holland, joined us some time ago. And she's actually spending her birthday today with us to tell us a little bit about what we're doing. So happy birthday, Laura. Can you think of a better place that you'd rather spend your birthday? Maybe. Okay. And Josh, of course. Who saw Josh speak, by the way, a little bit earlier?
Yeah.
Did Josh rock it or what?
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. We're joined by Josh, who has told me who's the CEO of MWI, based out of China. And he's told me that if we all marketed ourselves like skateboard companies, the world would be a much better place. So that's the vantage point that you're coming to from Josh. So let's dive in, guys. Maybe you could just sort of one after the other, no particular order, but let's start with Amit. So what kind of clients are you working with? You work on the agency side of the business. Tell us a little bit about your clients you're working with and the main pain points that you're seeing when it comes to both content marketing and content strategy.
Sure. Okay. So it's based out of Dubai. So we work with actually two sets of clients: people who are in the region already, and then people looking to break into the region. So predominantly sort of companies from the UK or US who are looking to kind of form some sort of presence in the Middle East. Pain points.
We only have 50 minutes to hear all
I
the
know, I was going
points.
to say it. So again, lack of sort of experienced content marketing resource,
Yeah.
lack of understanding of content marketing, and the opportunities from that, and just the region in itself, it's a bit of a kind of, closed place. So companies putting their stuff out there isn't really, they just don't know if they should be doing that.
Got it. Good setup for many questions that will follow. Laura, tell us a little bit about the kinds of clients and customers that you've been working with in the translation space and what pain points you're feeling there from the global perspective, particularly Europe.
Yeah, so I've worked in the translation industry for a couple of years before joining Writer Access, and I worked with a lot of European book publishers, including HarperCollins in London and Taschen in Germany. Well-known book publishers who buy the rights of books in mostly the US and the UK, and then want to produce and translate the book in European languages. But I also worked for marketing agencies, big company like Yext in New York, and I helped them translate their marketing materials into different languages. And also a lot of clothing brands for some reason, but they translate a lot. And I think the number one pain point is that it's hard for them to, not necessarily these examples of customers, but in general, to have a strategy for international content and multilingual content. And basically it's determining who's in charge of it, how to which content you're translating and which content you're not translating, which countries and languages you're targeting, and all those strategic points are difficult to kind of bring together into one translation strategy.
Josh, maybe the same question sort of as well, with an immediate follow-up to whatever you're going to tell us.
Sure. So MWI, so we have offices in the US and in Hong Kong, which is technically part of China, but don't tell the Hong Kongers that. They do not like the fact that China owns them. So we do business domestically in both places. So in the US, we're serving US clients. In Hong Kong, we're serving Hong Kong clients, Asia clients. But we're also helping companies that are in Asia to enter Western markets, and we have the capability to help customers who are in Western markets to enter Asia. And that's where we really have an advantage because there aren't many people playing across both sides of that. And in terms of pain points in Asia, the digital marketing industry there is about 10 years behind the US. I mean, there are companies that are caught up, there are companies doing great things, but most companies there are very much behind the times. I find myself answering the same questions there that I answered here 10 years ago. So that's kind of the pain, is just really that people are trying to catch up to what has already been done here.
Got it. That sounds like your pain point, by the way.
Yeah, it's my pain point.
What's the first thing that someone needs to know, Josh, if they were going to market in Asia?
The first thing to understand about Asia is that it's a very diverse market. It's not just Asia. China is not just China. In China, you have 30, 40, 50 markets within China alone. You have different dialects, you have different cultures, and so you can't go into China thinking, oh, I'm going to learn about how to market into China, and once I understand China, I can target this market of 1.2 billion people or whatever. Because Shanghai is a different market than Beijing, Shenzhen is a different market than Beijing. So all these different regions are, in some ways, completely different markets. And also, when you go into Asia, you have to deal with different social media networks. So in China, you have WeChat, and you have Weibo, which is kind of their equivalent of Twitter. And yet in Hong Kong, hardly anybody uses WeChat, or not that many people use WeChat. They're really active on Facebook, though. And they barely use Twitter at all, but Instagram's really popular. So in these different markets, different networks and different content distribution platforms are really popular. But just because it's popular in one country doesn't mean it's going to be popular in the country that's right next door to it.
Laura, in the European market, what's different about content marketing and content strategy from your perspective, particularly translation?
Yeah, I think I can kind of answer that. I moved as a resident to the US about 1.5 years ago, and what I see is that, you know, it's different for different European countries, but overall, Europe is where the US was a few years ago, so it's definitely, there's a difference there. E-commerce is really big in Holland, so a lot of online web stores are, you know, really promoting, doing a lot of SEO and content creation. But I would say that people overall, in my personal impression, are a little bit more skeptical. They think, listen, what's going on here? We have Google kind of forcing us to compete with each other in this sphere, and are we going to do that, or are we going to go about it a different way? But overall, 71% of European marketers are creating more content, or have created more content in 2015 than 2014. So it's definitely booming business, and the marketers are saying that it's the #1 content or marketing trend is content. So it's definitely pretty similar, but just a little bit different here and there, and it depends on the country as well.
Ahmed, the Middle East market, what's going on over there with content marketing?
Similar to what Josh said, but with a slight difference. So, you know, I'd say definitely from a content marketing perspective, we're between maybe 5 and 10 years behind. Social media is a completely different story though. I mean, these guys overthrew governments, right, using Facebook and Twitter. So you know, everyone's kind of very kind of connected on social media. Huge success there. I mean, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat is massive out there. But when it comes to the foundations, that's a problem. So there's a big tendency over there for people to start sort of running before they can walk. So we still have debates with people as to whether they even need a website, right, because they've got a strong social media presence. That's kind of the challenges we face. So a lot of the foundations actually aren't in place. One of our clients is Intel, and the whole Intel team over there are kind of you know, from the local market, and they're building their first local website now, and that's Intel. So
Let's go right back to you. What are the don'ts that you cannot do, for example, in your marketplace? You know, are there things that are simply taboo with regards to content marketing?
yeah, but the challenge is nobody really knows exactly what these are. So part of the challenge that we face is like opinion pieces, and you know, like maybe people are confused between finding, you know, the balance between sort of thought leadership and saying something they shouldn't say. You know, there's still challenges, not so much in Dubai, but across the region, where, you know, bloggers are getting arrested for having sort of strong opinions on how government should be run. So there's those sorts of challenges, and that kind of spreads to businesses because they're hesitant. You know, massive frustration we have is that blog articles have to go through legal departments. You know, so it's not really, you know, conforming to what it needs to be.
Got it. Josh, what does the content marketing industry going to look like in a few years? How fast is it progressing? I get the fact that it's behind the times, but is it moving quickly? Is now a good time to tap into that market?
It is moving quickly, and I think now is the time to move into it. Joe Pulizzi with Content Marketing Institute, he said he had some stats that said that in Asia, content marketing is making up about 25% of corporate budgets over there.
Wow.
I don't think it's always labeled as content marketing. I think he's taken a broad view of what is content marketing, because a lot of companies over there are doing content marketing, but they don't call it content marketing. They may never have heard the term, but they're still doing it. But he's predicting that over the next few years, that'll grow to about 50% of marketing budgets over there. And there's so much opportunity in Asia right now because they are just getting started and they're just starting to look for this. And so there's a great opportunity for content marketing companies to move into Asia and really get a foothold now, because I think 10 years from now, they'll have it all figured out. There will be a native industry there. But right now, we had a large insurance company come to us over there and they said, we've been searching for 3 months for a company that can design an infographic here in Hong Kong, and we couldn't find a single company that could do this. I mean, that's pretty simple work. and yet they could not find anybody in the Hong Kong market, a market of 7 million people, that could design a simple infographic. So that's kind of where the market is right now, but I think within 5 years that'll be a very different market.
How many competitors do you have in your industry in China, where in Hong Kong, where you are, versus Phoenix?
So we're primarily an SEO firm, but we do a lot of content, of course, because that's becoming more and more what SEO is. And so I started my business in Utah. In Utah, I probably have 300 competitors in terms of SEO. And it's a population of 2 million people. Hong Kong has 7 million people, and we have maybe 4 competitors in the whole country. It's bizarre to me how behind it is. They're really into PPC over there. They love PPC, it's very straightforward, they understand it, it's like advertising, they get immediate results. But when you go in and you talk about content and SEO, and it's gonna take some time, and it's not 100% predictable, they're very shy of that. They like things to be very safe, predictable, and yeah, there's some issues around that, but that's what they look for. And so convincing them to take a risk, or at least they think it's a risk. We think it's the safe way to go, of course, to do content marketing, but they see that as a risk, and so there's a lot of education that has to happen there.
Laura, the European market is global by definition. You have borders within miles of your location very, radically. Do the Europeans think globally, do you think, by default? And how does that relate to translation? Is this translation and transcription and transcreation and all these other wonderful terms that you know in your industry that we don't? Is it just normal? Does it just feel like the world is, you could market to anywhere in the world? What's the vibe over there?
So, you have a lot of countries and cultures in a relatively small space. So I'm from Holland. If you drive 2 hours in any direction, you're in another language, another culture, you have no idea what the people are saying. So it kind of teaches you, the dealing with other cultures. So I think a lot of Europeans are familiar with that. However, when it gets to Asia or the Middle East, it's just as exotic, I would say, as for the US. It's sometimes it's far away. That's my impression overall.
Got it. Let's talk about some examples of failure with content marketing. Anybody can go first. I'd like to hear from all of you. So, failures and lessons that we can learn from these failures.
Yeah. A kind of big one within sort of hospitality. So we work with a lot of hotels, and the Intercontinental Hotel Group launched, and I'd say they were probably the first major group to launch a full Arabic website, which was a huge project. So that's every Intercon, Holiday Inn, and all the other brands. Huge project, lots of translation, lots of copywriting, as well as obviously development work. Big bang in terms of a PR launch. But they forgot to change the images, so it just didn't resonate. I mean, the local, communities and audiences were just confused because you've got this great Arabic website there, and they've obviously made an effort, but it just didn't go down well. And if you imagine, they'd probably done maybe 98% of the work, but just forgot to replace images. So, things like that.
Please let me dive a little bit further with you on that. Is it possible that the American or US brand could have a positive influence on conversion rates in any way, shape, or form? Tying your brand to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've worked with a lot of clients on this, but what we found, and we're kind of finding more and more of this now, is if you're a UK brand or a US brand, don't hide away from that. We're seeing a lot in the region where people want to be associated to US brands and UK brands. They want people to know that they're associating themselves to these brands. So when the brands are trying to almost over-localize, they're kind of facing a little bit of a backlash. It doesn't feel the same. And we've seen that across different industries, different sort of target audiences as well.
Josh?
Can I jump in on that? In China, this is interesting, this American brand thing, because China had some scandals a few years ago with food in China, where there was infant formula that was manufactured in China and it had chemicals in it and it killed a bunch of babies. That's not good press, right? And so in China, they're very leery of any food product that is actually made within China. The Chinese people do not like Chinese food products because they don't see it as being safe. So Western food products are very attractive in China, but of course you have to deal with all the import regulations and all that type of stuff. But Chinese or American and Western food products do very well in China for that reason, because they're perceived as being safe, and it's a safety issue. And so American food companies can really take advantage of that in their content to emphasize the safety factor and the quality control, because that's such a big issue in China right now.
Are there any other industries like that, Josh, that are
Really, it's
big warm welcome mat for?
luxury is another one where there aren't many native Chinese luxury brands. They're starting to come up, but really the Chinese consumer wants Western luxury brands. So they want the Gucci, the Prada, all these other brands. And so the Western clothing brands and fashion brands and luxury brands tend to do really well in China, especially, but across Asia broadly.
How are they marketing to the marketplace? Gucci, Fendi, Prada. How are they marketing? Are they showing, American models? Are they literally pushing the extremes of the brand?
Yeah, they do. They adapt a lot of the market. It's not. I would say it's not localized marketing. They keep it Western, which I think is the tack that they want to take, because that's really what people are buying into over there. They want the Western feel. They want the Western brand. They don't want it localized for China per se. That might change in the future, but right now they want that Western brand.
Interesting. Any other thoughts on
Well, in
examples
terms
of problems, examples of failure?
Yeah,
in Europe?
so there are so many examples of translation failures by big brands or smaller brands, but one that comes to mind is Toyota. They have a car called MR2, and in France, that becomes merdeux. MR2 can be read that way, which means crappy or shitty. And turns out that nobody wanted a crappy car, so they had to drop the 2. So in France, the car is called MR, and everywhere else it's MR2. And another example is Taco Bell. They went to Japan and they translated their website with Google Translate. And it didn't work that well, especially the menu items, because they have weird names. So, for example, Supreme Beef Taco was Supreme Court Beef, and cheesy fries became low quality fleece, and it was all over the place. It was so embarrassing that within hours they had to take the website down, replace it with a white screen with a few links to their social media accounts. And they had to start from scratch. So I guess the lesson learned in case of Toyota is do your research, ask one person to look at your idea in the local region. And for Taco Bell is invest a little bit more money into hiring a human translator. So yeah.
Good stuff. I want to just ask you all about machine translation. I'm going to actually start with Laura, who has some interesting insights on how actually translators, believe it or not, are using machine language as a starting point, perhaps.
Yeah, so there's a lot of really good software that translators use, computer-assisted translation tools, and translation memory. So these are really helpful in making the translator more efficient. And they've been around for a while, so translators really know how to use them and when to use them and when not to use them. It's very different from Google Translate. It's not really a machine translation, but more a database that the translator over the years kind of acquires. So in some cases, it's really useful to do that, and even to use tools that are similar to Google Translate. For example, web stores that have a lot of repetitions in it. You can use software to translate the word cotton 10,000 times and not have to pay full price for that. So there are definitely instances where machine translation can be really useful, but always have a post editor, as they call it, a translator who can check it, and if it's and try a small part so that a translator can tell you if it's worthwhile to use a machine translation or just to translate it from scratch, whichever one is more cost effective.
Ahmed, how are you using? Are you using at all machine translation, and how are you translating in general in your marketplace?
I mean, we've got to kind of do it manually and then literally have independent verification done.
Yeah. More of a traditional agency doing.
Yeah, I mean, but we make sure, again, you've just got so many different dialects of Arabic.
Yeah.
It doesn't help that I don't read or speak Arabic, so that's not helpful. But basically, we get translators who we trust, but then we also get 2 levels of verification through sort of proofreaders.
Are they working directly with your clients?
Yeah, occasionally. I mean, that's
Yeah.
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 We need to. Saves a lot of time.
Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, so we hire translators, but it has to be a very human process for us. And part of the challenge we face is most people know that in China you speak Mandarin, and then in Hong Kong they speak Cantonese. And in Hong Kong they read traditional Chinese characters, but in mainland China they read simplified Chinese characters. So those are big differences.
I'm already confused.
Okay, but those are differences that are pretty easy to wrap your head around. Once you're on the ground for about half a day, you get that difference, and that's pretty easy. But within China, you have all these different dialects, and you have different styles of speaking within China, so you can't just say, well, we're going to hire somebody and they're from China and they're going to do all our Mandarin translation, because then you run into instances where we had this happen with a client where we did some content in English, we had it translated into simplified Chinese, and the client came back and said, you had somebody in Shanghai translate this, huh, didn't you? We said, yeah, actually we did. Well, you can't have a Shanghai person translate this. We need somebody in Beijing to translate this. And we didn't realize there was a difference between Chinese in Shanghai and Chinese in Beijing, but there were some stylistic differences. And so that's where Google Translate or machine translation won't really work for us, because we need to be sensitive to exactly the tone and the style that the client wants. And Shanghai and Beijing and Shenzhen and these different markets each have their own particular style. And the only way that we can match that is to get a human involved at this point.
By the way, does anybody think that's going to change in the next 5 years? Do you think we can perfect the art of translation on a machine level?
No.
Oh, perhaps
No.
Laura would like to answer that question? Got it. How about some examples of content strategy globally done extraordinarily well? Some examples. Who wants to start, Laura?
I think really the number one example is Adidas or Adidas, whichever version you prefer. But they have done a really good job. They went big from the beginning. So they localized and translated their web shops and web stores and their websites and content into a lot of different languages. If you go to their website, at the bottom you can see all the different languages that they have, and they've just done a really, really good job. And another example is the football club Chelsea in the UK. They have done something differently on a smaller scale, but what they did is they did a lot of research, and they ended up translating their website into about 6 or 7 pretty strange languages. So they translated into Thai, Indonesian, and languages that you wouldn't really expect. But the reason they did that is because they did a lot of research and saw that these regions have a lot of soccer fans, but not a lot of clubs that are to root for on a high level. So they did that and are very successful with it. Yeah.
You two didn't talk about failures yet, as I recall. Would you like to mention a few failures in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, well, the Intercom one I did. The other one that kind of, which I just don't understand, is Google. There's no reason why Google should get anything wrong, in my mind. If I try to create a new Gmail account or any kind of activity on Google which is outside of a normal day-to-day use, it always throws me back onto an Arabic page. And it's just lazy. I mean, more than half of the population of Dubai doesn't speak Arabic. You know, so it's, you know, and as simple as Google is, trying to find that English link to get it back just takes time and it's painful. But yeah.
Do you have
it's
any
strange.
insights, obviously living there, as to how that could have happened and why that happened? Do they just have a really bad global office managing that?
I mean, the only office they have is a sales office, so I don't think they really care about UX and things like that. But yeah, it's just, I think it's just a big oversight, but it must be kind of replicated in other countries.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they might be focused on the country and not so much the city of Dubai, maybe.
Well, even the country, I mean, there's only 10% of the whole country is sort of indigenous. So.
Got it. Save your positive vibe. Let's go hear some more negative vibe.
We have a lot of the same issue in Hong Kong. It's strange to me that these websites like Amazon, I mean, these people know what they're doing from a technology standpoint. I log into Amazon all the time. I never use the Chinese language version, and yet somehow, about a third of the time, I land on Amazon.com and they show me a Chinese language version, and I think, why are they showing this to me? I don't speak Chinese, I don't read Chinese. I have an account there, I've logged in 100 times. They should know that I never want to see the Chinese version of the Amazon website, and yet they'll still show it to me just because they detect that I'm in Hong Kong. So I see that same type of thing, and I see it with Google, I see it with Amazon, I see it with a lot of other websites where they're missing something somewhere, the way that they're setting cookies or not setting cookies, but they're not getting that right for me, and it especially causes issues when I can't figure out easily how to switch it back to English. And that drives me nuts when I'm on a website and I think, where's the button to switch this to English? And sometimes one of the issues is they'll put like a British flag or something to switch to English, and I'm not looking for a British flag because I'm not British. I'm looking for ENG so I can switch it to English, and I might even do a Control-F text search on the website searching for ENG so I can switch it, but it doesn't find it because there's just a British flag, and then I realize, oh yeah, British flag, English, okay, and I switch to that. So there's that mistake, but I think the biggest mistake I see in Asia is just a failure to do content marketing or to do it in a way that's flexible. So Larry Kim the other day, he talked about how he responded to something in the news cycle, and he created a 10-minute blog post or a blog post in 10 minutes, spent $50 on social media amplification through Facebook, and he got 250 placements in major media because he was sensitive to the news cycle. And too many companies are focused on a content marketing plan that has an editorial calendar that's very rigid and planned out, and so they can't respond to that news cycle. And I think this is an issue worldwide with all sorts of companies, but especially in Asia, there's this dedication to the plan and never veering from the plan. And companies really need to have that flexibility to say, hey, let's be ready for something in case it happens so that we can jump on that news, get some content out there quickly, and take advantage of that news cycle. And I think there's really a mentality that goes against that in Asia that's harmful.
Ahmed, maybe back to some success stories.
Sure.
Must be one that you've been part of, maybe 100.
No, I mean, I think the guys that sort of get it right, Red Bull, you know, I think it kind of
You
comes...
stole mine, that was mine.
Was it really? I'm sorry. But Red Bull do get it right, and I think that also comes down to them being very comfortable with who they are as a company.
Yeah.
You know, so the messaging is always very clear and very confident. And I think that sort of resonates well. That's not bad, just in case I take another one of yours.
No,
Feel free to go deep on Red Bull. I mean, who has not seen the Red Bull? Some of the Red Bull, like the diving series they did with the high divers. Have you seen that? Amazing.
I like the wingsuit stuff that they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people are in tune with Red Bull and what they're doing on a global level. Brilliant stuff. Go ahead, Jeff.
One success story out of Hong Kong that I loved, and from what I hear, it worked pretty well, was for a self-storage company. And again, self-storage, I talked about this in my presentation the other day, self-storage is the most boring business, right? I mean, it's boxes and boxes inside of boxes. It's a boring business, but there was a company in Hong Kong called SC Storage, and they did a series of YouTube videos, and they had a guy who was a Westerner, this white guy, but he was fluent in Cantonese. He had grown up there or something. And so they put him on these YouTube videos, and he was just crazy, over the top, dressed up like Bruce Lee, doing karate stuff, and lots of big graphics, very much in your face advertising, and it was just the way that they did it was very humorous, and it was very much localized and played to the local audience in a way that they found humorous too. So they did a series of about 20 of these YouTube videos, and this is very unusual for the self-storage industry to do anything that's video, to do anything that's creative really, but this series of videos drove a lot of traffic to their self-storage website and customers into their self-storage facility. But it was because they had somebody who was local who was managing this, and that was really the key to getting it right.
I'm gonna go to some open forum questions. In your respected markets, are content assets and distribution channels the same as they are in the States? When I say content assets, blog posts, white papers, articles, ebooks, webinars, workbooks, is the asset portfolio the same, or is it in fact very different in your respective parts of the world? Ollie?
Yeah, for us it is. It's exactly the same as the States. I mean, from the asset perspective, people still don't really get webinars, so we're kind of working on educating the market for that. But the things like white papers are just tremendously successful for any industry. And in terms of distribution, again, Google penetration is higher in the Middle East than what it is here. Facebook usage is higher over there than what it is here. So we're dealing very much kind of like for like.
Yeah, so I think there are some differences. So blogging and blogs is very popular in Holland, and social media overall I think Holland might be like the #1 country in the world in social media. And the only thing that I really know is that outside the US, mobile users are expecting even more from mobile content than in the US. So, when you're translating and localizing content, it's very important to keep the asset types in mind, like you said. What's popular, what content do I translate, and also the channels. So it definitely differs per region. Even in Germany, they use a different version of LinkedIn called Xing. So, it really differs per region and country.
Interesting.
And Asia, they have all the same stuff that we have everywhere else with blog posts and infographics, but it really comes down to the distribution that's different. So WeChat, for example, is a very different platform than we're used to in the West. It's confusing, it's convoluted. There are 4 different types of WeChat accounts that you can set up, and it's not straightforward like business account, personal account. It's very different. In one account, you can post once a day, and in the other account, you can only post once a week. And it's just very strange the way it's set up, but it makes sense to the users over there. And understanding how people consume content on WeChat is a must if you're doing business in China. It is the dominant platform in China for distributing content above everything else. You've got Baidu, which is kind of the Google of China since Google got kicked out. And so Baidu is a different type of search engine for distributing content. It's kind of a pay-to-play type of platform. So everybody always asks, if I buy Google AdWords, do I get better SEO results? And the answer is no. With Baidu, you do get better results, and they're very open about it, that you need to buy advertising if you want to get good rankings in Baidu and distribute your content there. But WeChat is what dominates in China. And then in the other markets, you've got Line, which, does anybody here use Line by chance? Anybody have Line installed on their phone? I don't see anybody raising their hand. So Line is huge in certain Asian markets, and then it doesn't exist in other Asian markets, but it's huge in some markets. And so again, it's really understanding in each market, from Japan to Korea to China to Hong Kong to Indonesia, what is the distribution platform there, because it might be very different from one region to another.
How about the way we craft content? Is it different in your respective marketplaces? testimonials more conversive, for example, than storytelling, or is storytelling not appropriate? Or what about authoritative style of content? Or humor, how is humor play in? Do you need to be careful? Is this tricky water that you're going down? Let's talk about your markets one by one.
Yeah, what comes to mind is informational. I think, my example of Holland is everyone's really practical and they want information, how-tos. So you see that everywhere. So I think in terms of content marketing, yeah, that's really popular right now. But it could be different in other European countries. I'm not sure about that. Yeah.
From our perspective, it really depends on which market you're trying to tap into. So if you're trying to hit the sort of Saudi Arabian market, video all day long, they don't have cinemas there, right? So, and there's so much sort of censorship that goes on that, the internet and YouTube is basically where they get all of their sort of information and knowledge from. So that's the kind of angle you'd go for with somewhere like Saudi. Somewhere like the UAE, it really, again, just depends on the kind of subset of the market that you're targeting. Simplicity is really important, so don't overcomplicate stuff. Humor is great, but again, you're dealing with maybe 150 nationalities in one country. So things, that might be damaging if you don't get it right. But where we've seen the most success is really just keeping things very simple language. Just don't overcomplicate things.
In the Saudi Arabian marketplace, you mentioned video, obviously. Can you actually, take advantage of that opportunity from a marketing perspective and tell stories that feature products and services in creative ways and get a captive audience very quickly if it's engaging and done well?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, there's a lot of brands that have done that really well.
Yeah.
In terms of sort of consumer
What
products.
length? Give us a feel for are we talking mini movies here that are 7 minutes long?
Yeah, there's no real competition, right?
Yeah.
So socially, there's not much going on.
Anything goes.
Yeah, and it's just testing it. So it depends on obviously what you're trying to promote, but the consumption is incredible.
Interesting. Josh.
In Hong Kong, it's almost difficult for me to talk about this is the way things are in Hong Kong,
Yeah.
because like Amit was saying, in Hong Kong too, we have such a diverse audience. There is the local Chinese population, but then you have a very large Western expat population, and these are people from all over the world, and you have a large Indian population, and you have a large Filipino population, and a large Indonesian population, and you have different cultures, different religions, different languages all mixing together. And so you could build a business just targeting these niche audiences. You could have a business just focused on the Filipino population in Hong Kong. There are 500,000 Filipinos in Hong Kong, so that's a substantial market right there. And but the one thing that is dominant in Hong Kong is mobile. Most people there, I don't know if I'd say most people, but many people do not have a computer. They don't have a laptop, they don't have a desktop, they just have their phone. And people are glued to their phones over there. We talk about people using their phones over here, and there are jokes about people falling into manholes because they're texting on their phone, but that is much more of an issue in Hong Kong. I see people all the time riding bikes and texting while they're riding their bike, and they're holding their phone up and steering with one hand and going down the road, weaving around while they're on their phones, and that's just very common, and everybody on the subway has their phone out. And it's not restricted by age either, so it doesn't, you'll see a 9-year-old guy on a smartphone, and this is a very common sight in Hong Kong, and so it really, everything in Hong Kong comes down to distributing in a mobile way. So video is very popular. And when it comes to specifics though, like the type of content.
Content style.
Yeah, content style. Humor definitely is effective over there, especially with video when we're talking about the local Chinese population. But I don't understand it. When I see the videos, I think, I have no idea why this is funny. I can tell they're trying to be funny. I don't get why it's funny. And even if I sit down with somebody who speaks Chinese and is local and they explain it to me, I still don't understand why it's funny. And so that goes back to the fact that you really have to have natives involved who really understand that local population. You can't just come in as a Western company and say, oh, we're going to adapt our content and then translate it and it will work because it's completely different.
I really want to take a few questions. How many people are going to have a question? Are there going to be some questions? Oh, of course, yeah. A couple? Okay. Before, let's ask one more quick one. Tell us about cost and budget and the cost to either hire people that can help a U.S.-based company penetrate a market with a content marketing strategy that makes sense. Give us a feel for budgets that people need to work about when you're thinking about covering some niche markets, but still give us a feel.
Real quick for me, I would say it's probably pretty similar to the budgets here in the US. What you're going to spend here is pretty similar to what you're going to spend there. The challenge you're going to find is just finding somebody to actually do it in the first place. The talent and the expertise just doesn't exist so much over there.
And do you see platforms, by the way, that can be, say, US-based, but simply translate and operate from the US, but with really solid good translations and marketing on even a light level like PPC? Can you go global much easier and faster now than you could 5 or 10 years ago? And again, is it less expensive to do that?
Yeah, Google AdWords, Facebook, Instagram, all very popular in Asia, very popular in Hong Kong. And so you can do that kind of marketing remotely there, as long as you have a native involved somewhere in the process.
Got it.
Again, the challenge would be finding the right resource. I'd say it's a little bit cheaper, but that's mainly down to it being tax-free over there. So that kind of helps, so you don't have to spend as much. In terms of cost of actually advertising and using sort of paid distribution, Facebook advertising on Facebook and Instagram is about 60% cheaper in the UAE. Google AdWords is more expensive than the US. So it just depends on the platform itself. But I think overall you'd be spending less money over there.
Yeah, I can take the angle of translation cost. I mean, the average translation agency in the US charges about 20 cents per word, but it depends on the language. And I think what you were saying about, is it easier than ever before? It is easier to get started in another market. What some companies that I've worked with have done is they translate their AdWord campaigns, but only the relevant parts, and then have landing pages translated. So it doesn't have to be super costly, but that could be a way to generate leads or to get a toe in the water and to kind of explore if that market could be worthwhile to invest more in. So there are many ways to get started on a smaller scale and get to know the market and do it that way.
Let's field a few questions. I know we have one from our famous insurance fan and attendee, whether wants a follow-up.
This is actually unrelated to my question from earlier.
Did
but
we answer that? Did they answer that?
Yeah, that was touched on.
Covered it.
So what about length of content? So in Dubai specifically, we just launched a product over there and our brochure is like massive. We had a local marketing agency work on it. It's like 30 pages long, way longer than it would ever be in the US. And I'm curious why, is there an interest for more pages? I mean, it was just pages and pages of pictures and.
Were they paid by the page?
They were not.
Ah.
They weren't paid by the page, they were paid for the project. So I'm curious, and then in the other markets, is shorter content also still valuable there as it is here?
So I kind of touched on it earlier where I think, again, depending on the product or the service, so if it's based on insurance, I mean, simplicity is still key. So the more detail you go into, the more potential objections you're going to get. From a legal standpoint, I guess from an insurance perspective, you've got to cover all bases. But yeah, it's difficult to tell without seeing it, but I would always kind of lean towards, what's the minimum amount of information do you need to give, and then maybe build on that after testing it.
Amit will do a free audit for you if you'd like it. Right, Amit?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, there we go. Another question? Oh, Lexi. Awesome.
So a few of you have mentioned a few global social media sites that aren't available in the United States. How can a United States or US-based company use those platforms to market globally, and is that something that's gated off to US users? Do you need to be working with somebody in those countries to market to those social media sites?
Great question.
With WeChat, there are restrictions. There are certain types of accounts with WeChat that you have to have a business set up in China to get that kind of account. And for Western brands, if they're a large brand, then they probably have a presence in China, so that's not an issue for them. But for a smaller company entering China, you end up partnering with another company that can help you get the type of account that you want to get and get the type of content distribution that you want to get. So yes, going into China, it's very definitely something where you want to work with somebody who's local over there, who knows how it works. Outside of China, but the rest of Asia, those are all completely accessible, open apps that anybody can use. It really just comes down to making sure that you're working with somebody who knows those apps. The same way here in the States, you wouldn't just say, well, hey, anybody can go set up an account on Snapchat, so I'll set up an account on Snapchat and we'll start marketing there. You would want to hire somebody who actually knows Snapchat. And so the same way, you would have to get somebody who knows Line or who knows these other apps that are over there.
Terrific. What do you say we take a 10-minute break and a big round of applause for our panelists? 10-minute break, and we're back with Brian Kramer, our final keynote, to send us off in the global world.